The striking thing about the floods is it's such a slow-moving disaster that it really, the course of it was probably over a full month. And we happen to have a cottage up there, so I was kind of doubly in the middle of it, worried about our own property, but worried about my neighbors too.
We had a ton of flooding. I was involved a couple of ways. Early on, I talked to some of the people who work at the conservation authorities upstream, asked them what they thought the chances were, and nobody was too worried about it back in March. Then it happened, of course, late April, early May, especially May. In particular, I was working one weekend, a Saturday, Sunday both, and I was the only reporter on, so I was out in my rubber boots sloshing around at the edge of the water and talking to people who were very, very nervously looking out from their front yards.
I covered the floods from maybe the last week of April, but it went on for a long time. It was like 2-3 weeks. And everywhere from, on the Quebec side to Lanark County and Masson-Angers and out in Pembroke. And of course, Constance Bay.
There was one day where, in Point Gatineau again, the military is doing their thing. And you see people's homes surrounded by water, but a lot of people are displaced. They're not there. But then this gentleman, Gaston Etier, came up in his boat and by himself, and I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was going to pick up his wife and just run some errands and do his day-to-day. So I asked him if we could go for a drive and a spin in his boat back to his house, and he said sure. Took me, did a tour through his neighborhood, which is in 4 or 5 feet of water. House surrounded by water, took me to his house, offered me, coffee, just another day for him.
I went to the Gatineau side and I went to the sandbag filling station, and tons and tons of volunteers. So that was pretty neat, seeing how, the second time around, everybody was ready to work.
This was just past the peak of the flooding, so it had gone up and up and up. It reached a record height all along the river, and it was probably down an inch or so from the peak. And there was no rain in the forecast, so these people were sort of taking a deep breath and thinking, okay, maybe I've got past the worst of it. But the pumps were still running full time, and there were people still fixing sandbags and arranging walls, and they were still very nervous.
I had a neighbor up there. I went to see him at one point, and he had crazy wild hair, which was never the kind of hair that he had. And I said, Dave, man, you need a haircut. And he said, you know what, I haven't left the house in 5 weeks. And that he meant when the power went out, he had the generator, he had to get up every 2 hours and put gas in it. He literally didn't leave the house for 5 weeks. He didn't do groceries, he didn't do anything, didn't sleep. There was that real sort of bunker under siege mentality that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And a lot of people helping each other. It was the only way people got through it. I mean, we showed up at our cottage one day and it was completely sandbagged. Both the Army and our neighbors and a cousin of mine up there had done the whole property. And then I just went across the street and helped, and some other guy who was sandbagging his place. I mean, it was all you could do was pitch in. But just the volume of water was just overwhelming. It was just a sight to behold.
The one thing with that story, it was, you're always waiting for, is this the worst it's going to be? Is today the worst day? Or are we getting better? And we keep watching, is the water going down? And this one, I think the big thing we're all watching was the Britannia berm, because that was built after the last flood, and we were waiting to see, is this thing going to hold? And if that thing would have broke, then I think the whole story would have gone. It would have been even worse because it was protecting quite a few homes. And so it's kind of this slow-rolling disaster story.